In the early hours of August 14, 2003, the town of Coin, in Malaga, was immersed in its popular festivities. Sonia Carabantes, a 17-year-old girl, was enjoying the fair. At the end of the day, she headed home, but she never reached her destination. Her disappearance triggered an immediate search protocol that mobilized thousands of citizens and security forces in an unprecedented deployment in the area. During 5 days, uncertainty and fear gripped the local population. On August 19, 2003, the search efforts culminated in a tragic discovery. The young woman's lifeless body was located in a rural area known as La Guira, situated within the municipality of Mijas. The crime scene presented immediate challenges for investigators, who had to secure the perimeter for the collection of forensic evidence. Among the elements recovered at the scene by the forensics teams, biological remains were found, including several cigarette butts of a specific tobacco brand, which were sealed and sent to the laboratory for genetic analysis. At that moment, the authorities were unaware that this evidence would not only clarify Sonia's murder, but would also dismantle years of speculation and previous judicial errors. While the deployment in Coin attempted to reconstruct Sonia Carabantes' final hours, the National Police investigators were immersed in strategic surveillance work. This unit, despite not having direct jurisdiction in the area, maintained its focus on an individual after having analyzed the patterns of a similar disappearance that occurred years earlier in Motril. The suspicion surrounding Tony Alexander King, whose original name was Tony Alexander Bromwich, did not arise from nothing. The turning point was the complaint filed by his ex-wife with the security forces. The woman, who had lived with him, decided to break her silence upon harboring deep suspicions about her ex-partner's involvement in violent crimes. Her testimony provided fundamental data that the agents documented meticulously. She confessed that she was afraid of him and described how, on the night of Rocio Wanikoff's disappearance, King arrived home at an unusually late hour. She reported that, upon his arrival, he showered immediately and washed all his clothes, a behavior she described as alien to his usual routine. She noted having observed a cut on King's leg. And finally she pointed out to the agents that he smoked exactly the same brand of tobacco as the cigarette butts found years earlier at the crime scene of Rocio Wanikoff. With this background, the National Police agents initiated high-precision undercover surveillance. During this operation, the main objective was to obtain a recent genetic sample without the suspect becoming aware of the surveillance. The opportunity arose when King, unaware that he was being monitored, discarded a cigarette butt in the public street. Cecilia's bravery was not just an act of collaboration, it was the breaking of the silence imposed by King in his environment. She not only provided data, she provided the mental map of a predator who felt untouchable in the bubble of the British expatriate community in Malaga. The agents, aware of the dangerousness of the target, applied a static and dynamic surveillance protocol. The collection of the discarded cigarette butt was not a coincidence, but the result of a high-precision follow-up operation where the chain of custody was strictly applied for the subsequent comparison of genetic profiles using STR, short tandem repeat, amplification techniques, ensuring that the sample was incontrovertible before any court. The agents recovered the object with all chain of custody guarantees for immediate analysis. The result of the forensic report was conclusive. The DNA profile extracted from that cigarette butt matched perfectly with the biological remains recovered from the crime scenes of Rocio Wanikoff and Sonia Carabantes. This scientific discovery, forged in the follow-up of a case in Motril that had gone unnoticed by others, became the smoking gun that shattered Tony King's facade of normalcy. With the DNA match confirmed, the investigation advanced to the entry and search phase. Police agents proceeded to meticulously inspect Tony King's vehicle, a Mazda model car that would become a central element of the case. During the inspection of the automobile, a piece of evidence of incalculable value was located, a fragment of a headlight cover that presented bloodstains. After a detailed analysis, it was confirmed that this physical remnant fit with precision with the fragments found in the place where Rocio Wanikoff's body appeared, consolidating an irrefutable physical connection between the suspect and the scene of the first crime. After proceeding to his arrest, Tony King was subjected to interrogation. Faced with the evidence presented by the investigators, the suspect ended up acknowledging having committed, in solitude, the murders of Rocio Wanikoff and Sonia Carabantes. Furthermore, during these appearances, King confessed to having perpetrated at least 3 other sexual assaults in the province of Malaga since his arrival in Spain in 1997. In his judicial appearance, King provided specific and concrete details about the murder of Rocio Wanikoff that could only have been known by the material author. Regarding the murder of Sonia Carabantes, King tried to qualify his responsibility by alleging that the young woman's death occurred by accident, a version that contrasted radically with the evidence found in the investigation. The discovery of the evidence against Tony King provoked an immediate domino effect in the judicial sphere. The second trial of Dolores Vasquez, which had been scheduled for the autumn of 2003, was suspended in the face of the new evidentiary reality. In August of that same year, the examining judge No. 6 of Fuengirola, Maria Jesus del Rio, decreed the provisional dismissal of the summary, dismissing the requests of the private accusation exercised by Alicia Hornos. After remaining 519 days in preventive prison, Dolores Vasquez was set free. Parallel to this, the investigation brought to light a series of institutional failures that allowed King to operate with impunity for years. The suspect, whose real name was Tony Alexander Bromwich, possessed an extensive criminal record in the United Kingdom. In 1986, with only 19 years old, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for sexual assaults in London, being known by the press as the Holloway Strangler, because he strangled his victims with electrical cables. After leaving prison in 1996, he changed his legal name to Tony Alexander King, a practice permitted in the United Kingdom for criminals involved in high notoriety cases. In August 1997, King tried to rape a woman at the Leatherhead train station, an attack that was recorded by security cameras and broadcast on the BBC programme Crime Watch on September 2 of that year. Despite that, Scotland Yard identified King in Mijas 6 months later and asked him to return voluntarily to the United Kingdom. The Spanish Ministry of the Interior, after being notified, marked the information as low risk and did not proceed with any request for arrest or extradition. Here we are not talking only about an administrative error. We are talking about a chain of negligence where the Ministry of the Interior acted, de facto, as a necessary collaborator. Ignoring an active arrest warrant from Scotland Yard, under the bureaucratic pretext of low risk, despite his history as the Holloway Strangler, was not a minor failure. It was the signing of Sonia Carabantes' death sentence 5 years before it occurred. This police file reveals how institutional blindness prioritized public image over citizen security, allowing a subject internationally filed to integrate into the Malagueño social fabric without any supervision. This history of negligence allowed a repeat sexual predator to remain in Spain, where in 1999 he would murder Rocío Waninkoff and, finally in 2003, Sonia Carabantes. After her release, the psychological and social impact on Dolores Vázquez was devastating. In a press conference held at the El Oasis restaurant, Vázquez appeared before 40 media outlets to break her silence. With a fortitude that contrasted with the media harassment she had suffered, she denounced the systematic errors of the instruction. Vázquez was blunt. She stated not having seen Tony King in her life, denying any personal or professional link, an extreme that was verified by the management of the hotel chain where she worked. The ex-prisoner pointed directly to the action of certain civil guard agents and denounced the fabrication of testimonies through the use of a psychic and the manipulation of the prison psychologist. Likewise, she attacked the responsibility of the media, which had executed a parallel trial, reaching to erase news and previous reports to try to make up her role in the construction of that media monster that condemned her before any judge. Despite the tragedy, Dolores Vázquez maintained a dignified posture, rejecting the millionaire economic offers that rained down on her to participate in television programs. The state, for its part, denied her any type of compensation. A doctrinal modification of the Supreme Court on Article 294 of the Organic Law of the Judiciary blocked the possibility of economic compensation, and no institution asked for forgiveness. The then Minister of the Interior, Ángel Acebes, far from recognizing the failure, justified in Congress the prison of Vázquez shielding himself in her criminal profile, an infamous declaration taking into account that she lacked criminal records. It was not until April 2026 when a symbolic reparation medal was announced, too late and with a bittersweet flavor after more than 2 decades of institutional abandonment. The final trial against Tony Alexander King, held in December 2006, left a disturbing legal and sociological lesson. The popular jury, composed of 9 people, declared him guilty by unanimity of the murder of Rocío Waninkoff, although it exonerated him of the accusation of sexual assault due to the advanced state of decomposition of the corpse, which prevented obtaining conclusive forensic evidence. However, the verdict revealed a gender bias that was difficult to ignore. While in the case against Dolores Vázquez, the judicial system accepted the premise that a woman of normal complexion could murder and move a body alone, in the trial against King, a man who practiced bodybuilding and had a robust physical constitution, 7 of the 9 jurors voted in favor that he could have had accomplices. It is a macabre judicial irony. When the suspect was a woman, the system did not need to look for collaborators. The imagination of the prosecution and the media pressure were enough to build a story of absolute guilt without physical evidence. However, when the material author turned out to be a man of robust and muscular constitution, the jury, unconsciously affected by a structural gender bias, needed to project the possibility of an accomplice to rationalize a violence that they found difficult to attribute to a single individual. This disparity in the valuation of the same criminal act underscores the profound failure of perspective with which the system approached both processes. The final balance of the sentences against King amounted to 19 years in prison for the Waninkoff case and 36 years for that of Sonia Carabantes, added to 7 additional years for an attempted rape in Benalmádena in 2001. 2 crimes that, in last instance, are the testimony of a system that failed at all its levels. From the omission of the international alerts of Scotland Yard to the blindness of a police instruction obsessed with an erroneous profile. Sonia Carabantes died in a crime that, with minimal and professional police management, could have been avoided, becoming, much to her regret, the key that opened the cell of an innocent and closed that of the true predator. Beyond the condemnatory sentences and the technical resolution of the cases, a question remains that torments society. How many more lives would Tony Alexander King have reaped if he had not been captured after the murder of Sonia Carabantes? The reality is that the system, when ignoring the alerts of Scotland Yard in 1998, was not only complicit by omission, but allowed a serial predator, already identified and filed internationally, to operate with total freedom in the Costa del Sol. The story of Sonia Carabantes is, in essence, the story of a victim who not only lost her life at the hands of a murderer, but was used by fate, and by judicial inefficacy, as the only silent witness who could save another person from prison. The case of Sonia reveals a carum justice. A new brutal death was needed for investigators to review what was in front of their eyes, and that, due to prejudices and lack of expertise, they decided to ignore in the case of Rocio Waninkoff. The legacy of this case is double. On one hand, the definitive validation of forensic science and DNA analysis as unmovable pillars of criminal investigation, capable of reverting human judicial errors. On the other hand, the institutional shame of a country that kept a woman, Dolores Vasquez, 519 days in prison under unfounded suspicions, without there having been until the date an act of real contrition, a formal apology, or fair economic reparation by the Spanish state. However, the closing of these files leaves a trail of uncertainty that persists decades later. Subsequent investigations and the analysis of other unsolved cases in the area have put on the table the suspicion that Tony Alexander King could have been linked to a much broader spectrum of crimes than what he confessed. The case of Maria Teresa Fernandez, disappeared in Motril in the year 2000, remains the open wound that many investigators link directly with the pattern of action of the British predator. Was King the responsible for more silences in the Costa del Sol? Although justice resolved the murders of Rocio and Sonia, the history of a predator who enjoyed years of impunity suggests that the map of his victims might never have been closed definitively. Today, Sonia Carabantes continues to be remembered not only as the victim of a predator, but as the woman whose murder dismantled a web of negligence that, if managed correctly years ago, would have avoided the irreparable pain of two families. As it was mentioned when analyzing the case, we are before a crime that could have been avoided, a constant reminder that justice is not an automatic process, but a responsibility that, when it fails, leaves scars that no sentence, no matter how long, can erase. I'm John Crimes until the next video.